Chapter 8 of When Woman Proposes by Anne Warner. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Jen Broda. Chapter 8 New Factor in the Crisis. The next morning, a whole nation lay locked out. Only the telegraph and telephone lines were working. Not one other form of business was exempt from the wholesale mandate. Not a train, not a car, not even a wagon moved. The wheels of manufactory, mine machinery, cash carrier, and printing press had alike ceased to turn. The entire laboring force of the country had obeyed their leader's call to a man, and in the course of only a few hours, the most gigantic strike ever contemplated had become both a fact and a factor in history. Lefebvre held the passkey to the situation through the network of wires which he had given out his intention of leaving in operation for the 12 hours beginning at midnight. Then, when noon should strike upon the following day, if the crucial question of a fair adjustment of pay and profit for labor, as well as pay and profit for capital, had not been satisfactorily settled in some way, he proposed to strike a final blow by at once and effectively ending the duel between the powers of rebellious rulers and those whom they ruled, by closing all the telegraphic offices forthwith. This ultimatum had been laid before the executive and his counselors shortly before midnight. They had already issued the call for troops. This action had been unavoidable directly the stoppage of the mail trains was known. The Army were charged as a whole to hold themselves ready for active service, to enforce law and order, to protect property if necessary, possibly to administer martial law, should occasion for force arise. The call for the troops went forth at 11. The ultimatum was brought in at past. The executive and those with him were considering summoning the country's lawgivers in special session for the hour set as final in Lefebvre's message. "We must advance the hour," someone said, breaking the silence that followed the reading of the message. "It is to be hoped that this time they will deal fitly with the terrific problem presented to them," said the head of the government. The strong lines of his face were laid in even more strongly than ever by the keenness of his determinations. Personally, he had no feeling that his countrymen were in rebellion. On the contrary, he felt himself backed up in a contest in which he had frequently fought single-handed and alone. Rebellion is a term whose only evil lies in the fact that its battles are generally to the weakest. A few minutes later, another message was brought in and read. The silence that followed the reading of the second message was deathlike. It is beyond the power of language to describe adequately the impressiveness of the moment. The call had gone forth to the Army, and the Army had responded to a man. The response had been one which threw the difficulties of the previous hour completely into the shade. The Army had replied that it also was convinced that there was but one effective and bloodless way of adjusting difficulties in modern times, and that therefore they, following the precedent set by the other inadequately paid millions of the country, had also gone out. A very few telegrams, cablegrams, and Marconigrams settled the truth of the statement beyond the shadow of a doubt. At midnight, the Army slept at all its posts, the Navy rocked at anchor without steam up, and the millions and millions and millions of men upon whose shoulders the heavy burden of life's manual labor usually rested, waited, wondering to see what was going to be done about it. At last, the old byword had wearied of its long allegiance and abruptly deserted to the majority side. About 6 a.m., two men met without witnesses in a small private room in the executive mansion. A few hours previous, there had been a fair stretch of railway journey between them, but necessity had found means to convey one to the other. Perhaps necessity had employed an automobile. Had these two men been less strong individually, Some species of horrible disorder might have resulted from the unparalleled manner in which one had chosen to cut the other's Gordian knot, but fortunately for the country which they ruled at the moment between them, each was equal and more than equal to the work which it had fallen to his lot to do. One was the head of the government, a man who fought for every cause in which the courage of his convictions backed him up. The other was Lefebvre, the genius of labor organization. They sat down on either side of a large writing table and looked steadily at one another, not with the measured glance of armed antagonists, but rather with the deep and comprehensive sympathy of co-workers in humanity's great travail for life. For life considered, not just as a struggle for the means to live, but life in its truest, broadest sense, the right to be good, do good, and provide for another generation to be better and do better. Both men looked white, tired, and very earnest. "This interview is not official," said the executive. "We are alone together, man and man, to discuss fully, freely, frankly, what can be done." "Only one thing can be done," said Lefebvre, "and that is the bill for the adjustment of wages in accordance with some equable division of profits must be passed as soon as the special session convenes today." "Excuse me," said his superior. He laid his hand upon the table and clenched his fist closely. "Excuse me, but that bill has become secondary in the present difficulty. When I received your first message yesterday afternoon, I gathered no faintest suspicion of its actual purport from its wording. The last blow found me totally unprepared. The whole burden of this crisis is, in my eyes, a mere nothing beside the action of the sworn servants of the government itself. As I said before, we are alone, you are a man of honor, I am the same. I ask you then to satisfy me first of all by telling me how and by what means you so completely, so suddenly, in so astonishing and overwhelming a manner, gained control of the entire body of our military and naval force. Day before yesterday, there were no more brave and loyal citizens in the world than the soldiers and sailors of our country. Last night, they planted their bayonets and pikes against the very heart of their motherland." Lefebvre smiled. "The explanation is very simple," he said. "Opportunity is ever the instrument of wisdom and the soul of enterprise. I simply showed the army their opportunity. They seized it, that is all. But there was neither discontent nor dissatisfaction. No, but there was a very fair leaning towards both sentiments, and the shadow was so like the substance that the effect upon the case was precisely the same as it would have been if the Army and Navy had really been disaffected and discontented. We will say disaffected through insufficient pay. We will say discontented because the bill to remedy the matter was so promptly laid upon the table, while that very day, if my memory serve me rightly, a bill to dredge and build locks in an unnavigable river for purposes of private exploitation on its shores was passed at once and pledged 3 times the money." The executive sat silent. Then, after a few seconds, he said, "You have been contemplating the Army and Navy as possible allies ever since the bill for increasing their pay was laid over?" "No," said Lefebvre. "The idea never entered my mind until yesterday morning." The other man started violently and searched his face with a glance of quick apprehension, as if fearing a sudden access of insanity. "Until yesterday morning?" he repeated. "Until yesterday morning," said Lefebvre imperturbably. "And then?" "Then it was suggested to me." "Suggested to you? By whom?" "By a woman." The executive laid both hands upon the arms of his chair with the suddenly arrested start of one whose interest puts down his astonishment. "By a woman?" he exclaimed. "By a woman." "A woman where?" by a woman of this city. She came to my office by the morning train yesterday. She stayed 2 hours. At first I was unable to grasp the full scope of her plan. Then when I did grasp it, I saw no way to put it into successful operation without the outlay of a sum of money far greater than I could command. I told her so frankly. She provided the money. Then she took an afternoon train back here. The chief's face had become bitterly hard and doubtful. Are you intending to imply that you bought the troops over, man by man? He asked. There was a tone of contempt at the preposterousness of the story in his voice. Lefebvre smiled again. Not at all. I merely mean to state that by the immediate outlay of some millions of dollars, I got a concise statement of the case into the hands of every officer on land and sea in less than 3 hours, thus giving him 8 hours to retail the situation to his command and ensure their unanimous cooperation when the call came. Good God, said the executive. He leaned back in his chair, placed his hand over his eyes, and was again silent for some seconds. When he looked up, Lefebvre was regarding him, motionless. You say that the woman is here? The chief asked then. Yes, she lives here. Have you her address? Yes, certainly. Let us send for her. Lefebvre bowed his head in acquiescence, took out his notebook, and produced the address. What sort of a woman is she? The executive asked. She is a very remarkable woman, said the other man. She impressed me as being one who would move heaven and earth to accomplish anything which she set out to do. I think she seems to be doing it, said the executive a little grimly. Well, we will send for her and consider the possibility of her appearing as a witness before the special session when they take up the first bill, the one as to the army pay. Lefebvre looked steadily across the table. The first bill to come up, he said, must be the bill for the adjustment of wages. The army can wait. They have waited before. I beg your pardon, said the executive. The army is the backbone of law and order in the country. Give back that pledge, and you will win an admiration and respect which will strengthen, never weaken, your cause. Magnanimity at this juncture should go hand in hand with absolute power. My cause has waited long to come into power, said Lefebvre, and strong as it appears in this hour, I hesitate to apply the golden rule too closely. I will pledge you my honor if a pledge is necessary, said the executive. The lesson has been learned, I believe. Let us abide by its coming consequences. Very well, said Lefebvre. I will give the army bill precedence. And now what did you say the address was of your adviser? Asked the chief, smiling. Mrs. Natalie Arundel, and there is her house and street number. He pushed a card across the table as he spoke. The other man struck a call bell and gave an order to the responding servant, and then rose wearily from his seat. The special session convenes at 10 o'clock, he said. It is 6:30 now. We have a brief hour before Mrs. Arundel's arrival. May I offer you a room and an opportunity to take a little rest? I shall be most grateful, said Lefebvre. I am indeed very weary. He rose too, and together they left the room. End of chapter 8.